You are cutting strips of meat in the early morning. The animal was killed yesterday. By tonight, if this meat is not preserved, it will begin to rot. By tomorrow, in this heat, it will be crawling with maggots and unsafe to eat. You have no refrigerator, no freezer, no chemicals. What you have is fire, salt if you are lucky, sun, smoke, and the knowledge of how to use them. This is not about making the meat taste better. This is about making it last. Your family needs protein for the next 3 months. The dry season is long. There will be no other animals until the rains return and the herds move back through your region. If you waste this meat, if you let it spoil, people will go hungry. Children will weaken, so you do not waste it. You cannot afford to. For thousands of years, people across Africa lived in climates where meat spoils within hours if left untreated. High heat, humidity in some regions, insects everywhere, bacteria that thrive in warmth. No animal is slaughtered casually. When one is killed, either hunted or from the herd, everything about it must be used or preserved immediately. There is no second chance. The meat will not wait. So the work begins as soon as the animal is dead, and it follows steps that have been tested and refined over generations because the cost of failure is starvation. The first principle is moisture. Bacteria need moisture to grow. Insects need moisture to lay eggs that hatch into larvae. Rot is a wet process. If you can remove the water from meat, you make it hostile to the things that destroy it. Drying is the oldest method, the most universal, and the foundation of everything else. But drying alone is not always enough, and how you dry matters as much as whether you dry. Begin with the butchering. The animal is skinned and sectioned. Meat is cut away from the bone in strips, long, thin strips, not thick chunks. Thickness is the enemy of drying. A thick piece of meat dries on the outside, while the inside stays moist. That moisture trapped inside will rot even if the surface looks preserved, so the meat is sliced thin, sometimes less than an inch thick, sometimes thinner. The thinner it is, the faster it dries all the way through. This requires a sharp knife and skill. Uneven cutting means uneven drying. Uneven drying means some pieces spoil while others are preserved. Certain cuts dry better than others. Lean meat dries well, fat does not. Fat goes rancid. It develops an off taste and smell. It attracts insects. So fatty portions are often separated. The fat is rendered into oil or tallow, if it can be, used immediately for cooking, or discarded. The lean muscle is what gets preserved. Organs are treated differently. Liver, heart, kidneys, these are often cooked and eaten immediately because they spoil even faster than muscle meat and do not preserve as easily. Once the meat is cut, the drying begins. In the dry season, in regions with low humidity and intense sun, meat is hung on racks made from wood or laid out on mats in direct sunlight. The heat pulls moisture out. You can see it happening. The meat darkens, it shrinks. The surface becomes leathery. This takes days. The meat is turned regularly so all sides are exposed to the sun. It is brought inside at night or covered to protect it from dew. Dew adds moisture back. Moisture undoes the work of drying, so nothing is left out overnight unless the air is so dry that dew does not form. Flies are a constant problem. They land on the meat and lay eggs. The eggs hatch into maggots. Maggots consume the meat and make it inedible. So the meat is watched, it is fanned. In some places it is covered with light cloth or netting that allows air to pass but keeps insects off. In other places, smoke is used from the beginning. A smoldering fire is built beneath the drying racks. The smoke drives flies away. It also coats the meat with compounds from the wood that slow bacterial growth and add a layer of protection. The meat dries in smoke rather than in open sun. Smoking is the second major method, and in humid regions where the sun alone cannot dry meat fast enough, smoking becomes essential. Humidity slows evaporation. Meat hung in humid air dries too slowly. Bacteria and mold get a foothold before the moisture is gone. Smoke solves this. It heats the meat gently, which speeds drying without cooking it. It deposits creosote and other compounds on the surface that inhibit microbial growth. It repels insects, and it adds flavor, though flavor is secondary to preservation. A smoking structure is simple. A fire pit dug into the ground or built with stones. A frame above it made from green wood that will not burn easily. The meat is hung from the frame. The fire is not allowed to flame. Flames create high heat that cooks the meat, and cooked meat does not keep as long as properly dried raw meat. The goal is smoke, not heat. So the fire is fed with wood that smolders. Hardwoods work best. They burn slowly and produce thick smoke. Certain woods are preferred for the flavor they impart or for specific preservative qualities, but the core requirement is that they smolder without flaming. The meat hangs in the smoke for days, sometimes a week or more. It is checked regularly. Pieces that are drying unevenly are repositioned. Pieces that are done hard and dry all the way through are removed. The fire is tended constantly. It cannot be allowed to go out because interrupting the smoking process leaves the meat vulnerable. It cannot be allowed to flare up because that ruins the meat. This is not a process you start and walk away from. It requires attention, labor, and time. Salt, where it is available, changes everything. Salt draws moisture out of meat faster than air or smoke alone. It also creates an environment that bacteria cannot tolerate. Meat rubbed with salt dries quicker and keeps longer, but salt is not available everywhere. In coastal regions, in areas near salt flats or salt mines, it is abundant. Inland, far from these sources, salt is rare and expensive. It is traded, sometimes over vast distances. A family with access to salt can preserve meat more efficiently. A family without it relies entirely on drying and smoking. When salt is used, it is rubbed into the meat immediately after cutting. The meat is buried in salt or coated heavily and left for hours or overnight. The salt pulls water out. You can see liquid pooling around the salted meat. That liquid is drained off. More salt is added if needed. After the salting, the meat is rinsed briefly or brushed clean and then hung to dry or smoke. The salt has already begun the preservation. The drying or smoking finishes it. In some regions, a combination of methods is used. Meat is salted first, then smoked, then dried in the sun. Each step adds security. Each layer of treatment makes it harder for spoilage to take hold. This redundancy is not inefficient, it is necessary. You are trying to make meat last for months in conditions where untreated meat lasts hours. You use every tool available. There are other techniques, less common but effective, in specific contexts. In very dry climates, meat is sometimes buried in hot sand. The heat and dryness of the sand pull moisture out quickly. The meat is wrapped in leaves or cloth to keep sand out of it, buried for a day, then removed and hung to finish drying. In highland areas, where temperatures are cooler, meat can be air-dried without sun or smoke. The cool air slows bacterial growth enough that drying can happen over a longer period without spoilage. Pounding is another method. Dried meat is pounded into a coarse powder or shredded into fibers. This is common in southern and eastern Africa. The pounded meat, mixed sometimes with fat and berries or left plain, is stored in clay pots or sewn into leather bags. The pounding breaks down the structure, making it shelf-stable and easy to transport. It can be eaten as is or rehydrated in water or broth. Pounded dried meat lasts for years if kept dry. Fish is preserved using the same principles. In communities near lakes, rivers, or the coast, fish is a major protein source. Fresh fish spoils faster than meat. It must be processed immediately. Small fish are gutted, split open, and laid flat on racks in the sun. Larger fish are filleted and cut into strips. Salt is used heavily if available. The fish is salted, then dried, often in the sun but sometimes over smoke. Smoked fish develops a hard, almost brittle texture. It keeps for months. Dried fish without smoke is also effective but must be kept very dry. Any moisture and it molds. The storage of preserved meat is as important as the preservation itself. Dried meat is stored in containers that keep it dry and protect it from pests. Clay pots with tight-fitting lids. Woven baskets sealed with clay. Leather bags treated with fat to make them water-resistant. The containers are kept in cool, dry parts of the home, often hung from the ceiling where rodents cannot reach them. Smoke from cooking fires passes over them, which continues to repel insects. Meat stored this way is monitored. It is checked for signs of moisture, for mold, for insect damage. If a piece shows any sign of spoilage, it is removed immediately so it does not contaminate the rest. Storage is not passive. It requires ongoing attention. When the meat is needed, it is rehydrated. Dried or smoked meat is tough, nearly inedible if you try to eat it dry. But soaked in water, it softens. Cooked in stews or soups, it releases flavor and becomes tender again. The rehydration process can take hours. The meat is added to a pot of water or broth and simmered slowly. It absorbs liquid, swells, and becomes palatable. A small amount of dried meat, rehydrated, provides protein for a meal that feeds several people. The work of preserving meat is communal. When an animal is killed, it is often shared among several families. Each family takes a portion and preserves it. This spreads the labor and ensures that if one family's preservation fails, they are not left with nothing. It also reinforces social bonds. Meat is valuable. Sharing it creates obligation and reciprocity. You give meat now, you receive it later when someone else's animal is killed. Hunting, when it happens, follows the same logic. A successful hunt might yield more meat than one family can preserve or consume. The surplus is distributed. Everyone works to process the animal quickly. The labor is intense. An entire community might spend 2 days cutting, salting, smoking, drying meat from a single large animal. But that meat will feed people for months. The effort is worth it. In pastoral societies where cattle, goats, or sheep are kept, animals are not slaughtered lightly. They are wealth. They provide milk, blood, labor. Killing one is a decision made only when necessary. When it happens, the meat is treated with the same care as hunted game. Nothing is wasted. Hides are tanned. Bones are boiled for broth or carved into tools. Sinew is used for thread. Horns are shaped into containers. The meat is preserved using every method available. Blood from slaughtered animals is also preserved in some cultures. Fresh blood mixed with milk is consumed immediately. Blood that is not consumed fresh is allowed to coagulate, then dried into cakes or mixed with grain and fat to form a dense, nutritious food that keeps for weeks. This is less common but practiced in regions where every part of the animal is utilized because resources are scarce. The seasonal rhythm matters. In the wet season, meat is harder to preserve. Humidity is high. Insects are everywhere. Drying is slow. Smoking requires more effort because keeping a fire smoldering in wet conditions is difficult. So large-scale slaughtering and preservation is often timed to the dry season when conditions favor it. Animals that are killed in the wet season are shared widely and consumed quickly. There is less attempt to preserve because the conditions make it nearly impossible. During droughts or famines, preserved meat becomes critical. It is the reserve that keeps people alive when crops fail and fresh food is unavailable. Families who preserved well in good times survive bad times. Those who did not, who consumed everything fresh and saved nothing, suffer. The discipline of preservation is also the discipline of planning, of restraint, of understanding that survival depends on thinking ahead. The knowledge required to do all of this is detailed. You need to know which woods smoke best, which cuts of meat dry evenly, how thin to slice, how long to salt, how to tell when meat is fully dried versus just dry on the surface, how to keep fires smoldering for days without it going out or flaring up, how to protect meat from insects during the drying process, how to store it so it stays dry, how to recognize spoilage early. This knowledge is not written, it is demonstrated. A child watches her mother prepare meat. She helps with the cutting, the turning, the tending of the fire. She learns by doing, by making mistakes, by being corrected. By the time she is an adult, she knows she can preserve meat well enough to keep her family fed. There are failures, meat that molds, meat that is infested, meat that was not dried enough and rots from the inside. These failures are painful. They represent lost food, lost labor, lost security. But they also teach. A batch of meat that spoils teaches you what went wrong. Too thick, not enough salt, fire went out, too much humidity. The lesson is remembered. The mistake is not repeated. What is striking is the gap between effort and result. The amount of labor required to preserve even a small amount of meat is substantial. Hours of cutting, days of smoking or drying, constant vigilance. And the result is meat that, while nutritious and long-lasting, is tough, dry, requires rehydration, and tastes primarily of smoke and salt. It is not a luxury, it is survival food. But it works. It keeps people alive when there is nothing else. The system depends on cooperation, on knowledge, on discipline, on the willingness to do hard work in brutal heat for a future benefit. It depends on understanding that meat will not keep itself, that nature is actively working to destroy it, and that preservation is a fight against that process. A fight that requires constant effort and attention. And it worked. For thousands of years it worked. People preserved meat in climates that should have made it impossible. They did it without technology, without refrigeration, without science as we define it. They did it with observation, with trial and error, with memory passed down, with the absolute necessity of not wasting food. You look at a piece of dried meat, hard and dark, and you see hours of labor. You see knowledge. You see the refusal to let food go to waste, because waste means hunger. You see a solution to a problem that had to be solved or people died, and you wonder how much we have lost in forgetting how to do things without machines, without electricity, without the assumption that food will simply keep because we put it in a box that hums.